The so-called heroes who plundered the lost city of Dragon's Gate did not know it was they who had caused the end of the world as they knew it. Thinking that the reference to a gate in the city's name was apocryphal, they were surprised to find an actual magical gate beneath the long-forgotten city. The heroes were naive enough to open it, killing them instantly. All Mage Stone, the most concentrated magical substance in existence, detonated, causing millions of deaths, and many of the previous seats of power to fall. The breaking, as it became known, was 32 years ago. Since then, many of the factions were able to reassemble. There's a lot of this. Let's just review Mage Knight. So this is Mage Knight. Mage Knight is by Vlada Chvatil. I don't know how to pronounce the designer's name, but this was published by Wizkids. It's a cooperative fantasy game, but not really cooperative because you are trying to get more fame. That's kind of like the victory points in this, or experience, more than everyone else. The map is randomly built. You use cards you add to your deck to do actions, and you fight enemies, and you level up and accomplish objectives and interact with villages and stuff, and you get more fame, and as you get more fame, you level up. And that's the basic premise of the game. Now, concept-wise, I'm on board. I'm like, yeah, that sounds dope as fuck. I look at these hex grids, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Connect these up, they're randomly generated. That sounds dope. But, for me, it is too complicated. And not even necessarily that the rules are too complicated, just how the rulebook is presented is, I think, too complicated. Now, I was really excited to play this. It's ranked number 15 on Board Game Geek, so that's like a huge, steep number. And so I was like, hell yeah, let's get into this. Let's get into this and start killing some shit and just having a good time. The basic mechanics are not complicated, but there's so much information and there's so much stop and go, because when you're playing it for the first time, you have to like constantly go to the rule book to read new passages. It really takes you out of the experience. And I don't need people's shit of, well, if you think that's complicated, then don't play this game. Well, okay, I understand that some board games are complicated. And I'm not even saying that this is the most complicated board game ever. But listen, I'm totally down for sitting, reading through a rule book, and learning, even if it takes a while. I like, Terra Mystica, Caverna, Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island was a game I recently played that I really enjoyed, where there was a lot of rules, but like, I was totally down to read through the whole thing, because once you read through the whole rule book, you were ready to go. I mean, yeah, you have to check back at the rules every now and then because it's your first time, but all of those games are fairly complex, but again, after you read the whole thing, you're like, I get it. I don't need to really read more passages. Mage Knight, however, was a really rough first playthrough, and I don't doubt that subsequent playthroughs would be a lot better for me and a lot smoother, because now that I know the mechanics already and some of the things, it would be a lot easier, but boy was it tough to get through that first game. First of all, there are 2 rule books, which is not a good sign. This is the rule book, and this is the game walkthrough, and the game walkthrough tells you to not read the rule book, because the rule book is too complicated for your first playthrough, and instead you're supposed to follow through and kind of play step by step as through this walkthrough. Now, I understand why, because if you look through just the regular rulebook, it's dense. There's way too much stuff here. The walkthrough presents it in an easier to digest way. It gives you pictures, it gives you examples. This feels like a more traditional rulebook. But then why have this then? I mean, yes, it has all the details, but most rulebooks in games have a thing where it's like, the important stuff is in the beginning, and then in the back is okay, here's some nitty-gritty stuff that you might want to check if you run into a unique situation. I'm okay with that, but oh boy, this was rough. I don't know if I would have even had a better experience if I read through the rulebook, because here it says, it's not intended as a method for learning the game,
and especially not as a way to teach others how to play, but it's a rule book. We strongly recommend that players start by reading the game walkthrough. So I did, and this is an okay walkthrough. The problem is there are whole segments that you have to read as you're playing the game, whenever a new location is revealed. So basically, you're on this map made of hex grids, and as your characters move along the map, they uncover new patches of land, and as you do that, you put down these grids, and you uncover new locations. And every location has its own, not even like a tiny section, like it's quite a bit. Like revealing a mage tower, revealing a monastery, revealing every single little place has a new set of rules. It does come with little cards that kind of give you a summary, but first of all, those cards are printed on double-sided things, so it's really difficult to keep track of which, like, so like the village info is on one side and the mage tower info is on the other side, and so you're constantly trying to like flip, like, oh shit, which one has the mage tower info? I gotta look at that. Just have like a board or like a one-page pamphlet with just brief descriptions. Don't put them on double-sided cards. Like, this is rough going. And also, it's not like the cards are even that simple either. Like, they have a couple little paragraphs to read for each thing. But if you only rely on the card like we tried to do and don't read the full paragraphs, like whole passage. Hello, Sophie. If you don't read the whole passages in the rule books with the cards, you miss out on rules that we like fucked up because we were like, okay, well, I mean, the card has the info, right? Wrong. There's more info you need to read in the book. So you're getting into this campaign, right? You're like, okay, I'm getting into it. Oh, we uncovered a monastery and a mage tower. Okay, stop. Time to read the whole mage tower page, literally a page. Okay, now read the monastery. It's a drag. That whole stop and go really kills the momentum, and you're just sitting there going, oh my god, I just want to fight and explore and not have to listen to passages of info. Because usually in a rule book, all that stuff was in the beginning, right? Like, I'm fine with like reading a rule book for like an hour, like out loud, and then when you're done, you're like, okay, we got it, and you play the game with little to no interruptions. But oh boy, the walkthrough does not allow you to do that, unfortunately. It literally tells you to start playing and read stuff as it goes. Just, it's a rough format. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. The actual core mechanics are not that complicated. Basically, you have actions like move, fight, influence, and so on. And what you can do is you play down cards. I'll show you some. So let's say you want to move. Then you could play a March card. March says move 2, and the bottom card requires 1 green mana to play. But let's just do the top one, move 2. And then what you can do is you can actually chain cards to do more movement. So let's say I'll chain it with this. Okay, so now I can move 4, and so on. And also you can stack cards that don't say move, but if you do them sideways, it basically adds 1. So you're never like too limited. Usually you can do something. Sometimes you have a bad hand and you can't move, and that's kind of a bummer. But the actual mechanic of placing down actions and comboing them and to extend them is pretty fun. I enjoyed that. Throughout the game, you use mana, and there's this interesting little dice pool where you like roll these dice, and that's kind of like a common pool that the party can grab. They can grab like 1 dice per turn as a kind of like a free mana. And then you can also get mana from cards, which I like the little components for these little crystals. You can either get them as just regular mana tokens or crystallize them and keep them in your inventory. I thought that was neat. It's fun to get, use these mana tokens in the most efficient way in collecting them. Leveling up, killing monsters and getting fame is pretty satisfying because as you level up, you can uncover more skills for your guy, and you can get better cards to add to your deck, which you know me, I love my deck building. So you get a little bit of that, and that stuff was pretty fun. Like, I enjoyed that. I kind of wish those mechanics were in a less complicated game, because those mechanics are not complicated. They're very easy to do. The problem is these mechanics are sort of steeped in this massive set of rules for like every little location has different rules and conditions, and the combat is pretty good, but I mean, it was already a little overwhelming fighting like one enemy, and I know you can fight like multiple enemies. That sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. Here's the fame track where your little guy, your little token, as you get more fame, you level up, and so level 2 will get you a new skill and a new card. This will give you better stats and so on, and it alternates like that. You also have a reputation track where if you do good stuff, you go up kind of like Paragon. That's the wrong way. You go Paragon, good, or you can do bad stuff, and the more reputation you have, the easier it is to influence people, and if you go down this path, people might not even choose to talk to you. The little miniatures are fun. You know, we got this little knight guy. This dragon I picked. I just absolutely gravitated toward this. I love the design of this crazy dragon guy. So components wise, I was pretty excited. Like I like the little miniatures. They got little like castle miniatures. There's like an just interesting day and night mechanic that kind of works. It's a little irritating, but it works. And I really wanted to be able to get in there and, you know, do that stuff I wanted to do, you know, explore and influence, you know, recruit units and all that stuff. But boy, oh boy, was it just really aggravating to have to read more stuff. It's just a lot. And there's even stuff in the game that we just didn't really get to take advantage of because it was just too much. The game takes away parts of the game from the first campaign to make it easier, so I can't even imagine how complicated this gets when you play harder campaigns, because it's just too much already. Like, it just got to a point where we were done and we were just exhausted, and I just feel like I don't even want to touch this game for a long time. So here's the thing. You know if this is the right game for you, right? If you're a giant fantasy buff and you've played really complicated board games, you know you're gonna like this. So this video is not necessarily for you. You've probably been disagreeing very angrily with me this whole time, and that's fine. I personally don't need super complicated mechanics, right? I'm fine with something like, you know, Terra Mystica has a good amount of stuff going on, and yeah, it's a lot to learn, but once you start playing it, I think it's very elegant and very, very smooth gameplay after that. There's a lot to process in the beginning, but after you've all processed it all, it's smooth sailing. Caverna, there's a lot of stuff you can do in that game, but it never gets to a point where I'm like, okay, we gotta read another page of this rule book because there's a whole nother segment. Maybe if they simplified things a little bit, or maybe if the rule book was formatted in a way that it was made for smoother gameplay, like smoother teaching at least, I would have enjoyed this more. I don't doubt that if I played another game of this in the future, I'd enjoy a lot more, because now that I know how things work, it'd be smoother. But otherwise, if you're new to board games, I do not recommend this. It's very, very cumbersome. If you know someone who already knows how to play Mage Knight, and maybe I gotta find someone who does, then this game will be smoother, and it's fun. Like, the actual core gameplay mechanics are fun, but they're just surrounded by a lot of junk I don't need. These locations in particular, I feel could have been much simpler. There's just too many, like, exceptions to rules, and, like, different little subsets of rules. I don't get it. Like, I got it after I read the page of rules, but I don't get how that's enjoyable. So it really feels like it should have just been a video game, but they wanted to make a board game, and it just had all these mechanics that you normally don't have to worry about in a game, but when you're doing it, there's all these, it's just like calculating, it's rough. I would love to see these mechanics in a simpler game. I think that's just what it boils down to. The whole combining and stacking for actions and getting mana and crystallizing it and killing things and leveling up. If this were a simpler deck building game, I'd probably like it more. But having this map with all these rules is rough. If you're new to board games, don't play Mage Knight. If you are a huge fantasy complicated game buff, you already have probably played Mage Knight. And if you're like me, where you've played complex games, I personally was not a big fan of this, but I will be willing to give it another shot, and maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, I was not a fan.